So welcome to day 4 of 2022 ISCN conference. And so in today's session, we are going to be focusing on the embedding climate change education within universities. This session is kind of a logical continuation to presentations that we have seen on day 1 and day 3 to do with the challenges and opportunities universities in the Latin America facing in advancing sustainability. So I'm just wondering if we need a few extra seconds for the poll to be completed. Oh, it's actually, I think, is completed. So could we see the results? Oh, fantastic. So we've got kind of an even split with regards to where attendees are from. And so quite an interesting results to do with the teaching climate leadership within your university. So we see 42% of attendees are saying no. And then, so it's a bit selective, and I think it's kind of what I was expecting. So that the core curriculum is kind of probably the smallest part, only 8%. And with regards to the third question, we see that sadly 50% of delegates are saying that they, not specifically they, but their faculties or schools do not teach climate change mitigation tools. So very, very useful results. So for myself and other panelists, so let me introduce the first panelist, Professor Petra Molthan-Hill. She is a professor of sustainable management and education for sustainable development at Nottingham Business School. She is also co-chair of the United Nations Principles for Responsible Management Education Working Group on Climate Change and Environment. She also won the Sustainability Professional Award in the Green Growth Award 2016. And so she has co-designed the carbon literacy training for business school. So she is working at Nottingham Trent University, and she has been obviously training staff on that now. So she oversees the development of teaching methods on how to embed sustainability into various disciplines from social sciences and history. And her main research interests have been experiential learning methods and the integration of sustainability into curriculum. Now, for me, the latest 2 publications that Petra has co-authored were very actually quite interesting and eye-opening. So the first one is titled Climate Change Education at Universities, and relevance and strategies for every discipline, and handling climate change education at universities. So an overview that was published last year. So let me introduce our second panelist, Professor Dave Reay, who is professor in carbon management and education at the University of Edinburgh. and Executive Director of the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute. He is also the Policy Director at the Climate X Change, and he chairs the Scottish Government's Climate Emergency Skills Interdisciplinary Group. He recently led the development of a suite of open access courses on climate change aimed at young people around the world. They've also co-authored a number of publications in the field of climate change education, net zero solution and research priorities in the 2020s, and mainstreaming climate change education in the UK higher education institutions. I was privileged to be involved in the production of this inflation paper that gained a lot of attention during COP26 in November in Glasgow. So now a little bit about myself. I am a lecturer in research methodology at the Division of Dentistry at the University of Manchester. I've joined the university in 2012 at the time when discussions were underway that the universities and the healthcare sectors have an ethical responsibility to implement a green approach in their operations, and there is a need for sustainable education to be embedded in programs of study. So thinking green and promoting education for sustainable development has guided my actions for the last decade. Since 2014, I have been an active member of the sustainability group, and I also lead on integrating environmental sustainability into curriculum. So again, I'm just going to say welcome to all delegates, and so I'm going to ask Petra to kickstart our discussion by presenting her thoughts on the topic to do with climate change education.
Okay, yes, hello everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you now. So I want to kind of take you through a very, very fast tour because I'm only allowed 15 minutes, and I hope I will make it in 15 minutes through everything. Yeah, there's more to say, but as I say, I will just get started. If I talk too fast, someone has to stop me. Vitalia, I think you have to tell me not to be so fast because I want to fit a lot of things in. So what I want to first kind of show you is actually what we are aiming for, or what we are not aiming for, because obviously when you look at this slide here is what it has been developed by Climate Interactive in collaboration with the MIT, and this actually shows you where we are heading if we don't do anything. So if we actually decide, okay, forget about climate change education, we just don't address it, we just ignore it and just leave it, and we will see where we are ending. You can see that we are actually at the moment going towards 3.6 degrees. And obviously you all will know that this is not what we want to achieve. We really want to reduce global warming to 1.5 degrees. And therefore we have to really act very fast. And this is where climate change education comes in order to achieve this. Everyone needs to know about it. Everyone needs to know what they have to do. And therefore, obviously, we have to kind of get it integrated actually very, very fast into universities, into executive education, into workplaces and so on. So it's really, really important to get climate change education fast so people know what they have to do. So kind of what a lot of people don't realize, because a lot of people think, oh yeah, 2050 is a deadline, and this sounds really nicely away, kind of, so we can maybe waste a few more years before we do anything, kind of. But actually what also was said in the same report is that we have to halve carbon dioxide emissions by around 2030. And this doesn't sound too long away anymore. If you think that all over the world, we have to halve the emissions by 2030, so in 8 years, this is quite a big task. So this is why everyone has to actually get going and do the climate change education and then integrate it, teach it to their students, but also to their staff, because the climate change education is really not only about the younger generation, it's about everyone, as everyone who's working at universities at the moment needs to actually have certain basic climate literacy training to actually understand what can I do in my own job to achieve and work towards this target and be one part of halving these carbon emissions by 2030. We have asked a bit around, so as in the introduction you did hear that I'm the co-chair of the United Nations Prime Working Group on Climate Change. So we sent a survey out to business schools in this case, and you can see how many responses we had. And it was interesting that actually 90% agree climate change is a legitimate topic to be taught in business schools. So a lot of people said, yes, we should teach it actually. But a lot of them were not teaching it. And actually it's when we ask them, so what is the reason for not teaching climate change? It's the key things were lack of expertise and lack of space in the curriculum. So I think these are the things which we need to address first. And this is where the carbon literacy training or the climate literacy training is coming in, to give people, academics, who are teaching in the different faculties, to give them this basic understanding that they feel comfortable and realize, okay, this is how it works for me in all the different business disciplines, so be it accounting, operations, and so on, but also in all the other faculties, because you really have to integrate into everything. So even if it is linguistic or something else, where you might think, oh, this has no connection to it, it's actually very, very important that it's taught there as well. And people often think it's not important because when they think of climate change education, they think of the climate change science education. But this is only one part of 3 different parts. And the climate change science is obviously what you have heard and seen maybe that people are talking about. So what is the greenhouse effect? So why do we actually have global warming? What is happening to the poles? What is happening to the glaciers? So to understand really what is happening from a natural science point of view. So this is kind of something everyone needs to understand, but only to a certain amount. So I think I'm always in favor to say that actually we only need 1 hour per person to get the basics across. So in a moment I will actually invite you to do a full climate literacy training with me starting next week. And we only do 1 hour on the climate change science education, because this is enough to understand this, why high impact solutions are impactful. So I think you need to only understand the basics to understand these impact solutions, because I think this is where we should focus. We should not focus on understanding everything kind of, and then we would spend 10 years just trying to understand the climate change science. What you really need to understand is now, which I show you in the next slide, the climate change mitigation education. And this is where we need to focus. And this means actually everything we need to do to reduce the global warming. So, and this is for every discipline obviously quite different. So for example, in operation, in a business, it would be, as when you teach students in operation, you would teach them different things, and you would teach students in accounting, or students in agriculture, or students in engineering or so, but every one of them has actually already ready-made solutions which they could embed into their work when they go out there, which obviously when people are learning about it who are coming from industry or so, they could already learn. It's all there. So the solutions are all there. We need to embed them. People need to know about it, and they need to embed them in all the different things. So what is really important for the universities is to actually integrate the climate change mitigation education in every discipline. And as I say, it's really every discipline. So even if it is something like linguistic, for example, if you want to have a read here of this article here, it gives you a few examples why it's important. I won't talk about it now, why it's also very important in linguistics. So please do read this chapter, which is here actually mentioned at the top, which goes a bit more into detail for lots of different disciplines. Knowing this will also allow you to actually judge books. For example, you might have heard that Bill Gates has actually published a book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. Mark Carney who was the governor of the Bank of England, has published a book. And I won't judge them for you now, but I think it's important that you know these things, that you know climate change mitigation, and then you will be able to say, what Bill Gates is writing is good or is bad. And I leave it to you to find this out. Maybe you already know this and you will put us the answer in the chat, what you think about it. But this is really the background as well, that otherwise if you don't have the teaching, if you don't have it integrated in the climate change education, you won't be able to judge these solutions or what everybody is saying about this topic. And I think this is also very, very important to choose the right ones at the end. And then obviously we have climate change adaptation education, and this is especially I would say in lots of other countries very, very important. And I always make the point that I think for the UK, for the US, for Canada, for all the countries who are really high emitters, it's actually more important to focus on climate change mitigation at education at the moment, because we have approximately 8 to 10 years to turn this around. And I think we need to really focus on this, to get this into every curriculum, so that every student knows exactly what they have to do to mitigate climate change, that we don't have to adapt so much to the climate change. As if we don't do this, we will have to adapt on a massive scale, on an absolute massive scale. So I think it's really important to say, okay, let's focus on mitigation in the next 10 years and get it down as much as we can. And I think this is really important. But obviously in some other countries, you will know that countries are already very, very vulnerable and affected by climate change. Obviously there, it's very important to actually focus on the adaptation education and get the adaptation education integrated into universities, which is also very, very important. I wanted to just recommend this book because I think if you're interested in the topic, I think it's a fantastic book to get started from Reay, and it takes you really through the different steps, what you need to understand kind around the topic, and to really kind of become a bit more of an expert in it, and then know for yourself, for your own life, for your own work, how you can actually become active and take leadership in this area. And I think it's written in a very nice, I did recommend it to a colleague of mine. She said it was actually a holiday read at the end, and she found it very entertaining in some ways. Also, obviously, climate change always has a bit this urgency and that you need to do something, but she found it, the book is very easy to read and very interesting. Now I want to talk a little bit about the carbon literacy training we are offering. I was inspired by this actually when I was allowed to do some research with Coronation Street, and obviously I found this very exciting. If you don't know Coronation Street because you might not be from the UK, Coronation Street is a soap which has been shown in the UK, I think since 1960, so a very, very, very long-standing drama in the UK, and is seen by approximately 8 million people every night. So it is quite well known in the UK, Coronation Street. And I found really exciting that they said, okay, can you come to us and actually analyze how well this carbon literacy training, which we have done, how well this has been introduced in all the different departments and what they have achieved. So I was allowed to interview all the head of departments, so whether it was in costumes, whether it was around sound and so on. And I was really impressed by the changes they had achieved and the reduction. And this was the kind of training they had done. As a Coronation belongs to ITV, as a channel ITV, and they had actually worked ITV and the BBC, which I'm sure you will know as the other channel in the UK, had actually worked together to do this carbon literacy training with major teams, kind of for major documentaries, but also soaps and so on. And actually the BBC had calculated that in 3 years they had actually reduced their carbon emissions by 50%, which was obviously quite impressive. So I think this training has been done very, very well. So if you want to read a bit more about it, as we have written an article about it, which I have put you there. But what for me the outcome was, besides some insights from it for my research, was really we need to have this training for other areas. So this is when we started actually to design the same training for business schools. So we actually have a version which we specifically offer to business schools. And I won't tell you more because I think I'm running already with my time. I want to especially talk to you about the university-wide course. So we have, after the business school version, we did actually make one for the whole university. And this one is really for anybody in the university. So if you're an academic and you're teaching people, it's but also for anyone who is working in procurement, who is working in finance, who's working in anything in the university, who's head chef or something like this. Is for everybody kind of. And this training can be, as if you're in the UK, you can get it free of charge from the Carbon Literacy Project to actually do it in your own university. If you are interested in experiencing the training, which I just showed you on the slide before, we are running the next one starting next Thursday. And it will be for 5 Thursdays, always 2 hours. And it's done actually as you know that I'm co-chair of the United Nations Prime Working Group on Climate Change, and we are working together with QS World Merit to deliver the next training. So here's if you want to sign up, please use this, and maybe we can put it in the chat as well so that you can sign up for it. And I would strongly encourage you to join, to actually understand as the focus of the training is really on climate solutions, and so that you really understand, oh yeah, I could fix this solution, I could fix this, depending on what you're working in. So I think it will be really useful for anybody to actually take this training. If you want to read about the carbon literacy training, we also have written in this handbook of climate change mitigation and adaptation. And I wanted to, because I was also asked to give some interesting ones which you can embed into for students. So I wanted to highlight this one. I really like this one a lot, where students are actually facilitators in the training to people from all over the world. So as this one was, as which you can see here on the screen, it was actually for people, for 2 schools. One was in Dubai and one was in the UK, and the students were actually supporting the teachers to understanding the carbon literacy training. So it's one of my favorites. And then this one I wanted to also highlight, which I think would be fantastic if every university would do this. And this is actually something where you kind of send the students as consultants. So this was part of the core curriculum since 2010 in our business schools. And this actually where we have sent out our students to go into small and medium enterprises, especially in Nottinghamshire, where we are based, obviously in Derbyshire, and to work with all these different companies on how to integrate greenhouse gas management into their own companies, and then how to reduce it as well. And I think this is quite a nice project, and we have recently extended this, as it was first done for approximately 10 years from the business schools, but we then applied for some funding, and we are now doing it with other disciplines. For example, the businesses here in Nottingham, they can also get advice on how to design the buildings. For example, our architecture students are now also involved, and they have it in their core curriculum as well, so that they can advise business on how they can actually change their buildings and so on. So I think this is quite a nice project, and I would really love people to take it up, to do it in every city in the world. So if you have any chance of actually getting it into the core curriculum, especially architecture, business, product design, these kind of disciplines, it would be fantastic, and then help the business in your community to actually make the changes as well. Yeah, and then we have an upcoming book, and I only want to advertise it already. It's a handbook of carbon management, and this is really for every manager in every function. So it would be also for every manager in the university, every employee at the university. And as you can see, it is kind of around all the topics you would have in a university as well, procurement, marketing, pension funds, and so on. So I would really strongly encourage you to buy this book, which comes in September. So this was a bit of an advertisement. And this one is for afterwards. I'm not playing it now. It's a nice song to pass it on. Please get more people on the case. So if you get the slides, please do play the song to yourself as well. I think it's quite a nice one. Actually, now it's starting. And I hope I did manage the 15 minutes. How was this? Was it 15? I think it was slightly more, no? Or?
No, it's actually 14. So well done, Petra.
Okay.
And thanks again for this insightful presentation. So a lot of good messages and a lot of interesting reading for delegates who joined us. Now I just would like to point out that so overall the presentations should last around 30 minutes. Obviously, we've already heard from the first panelist. So I would encourage you to carry on posting your questions in the chat. So you can do that at any time. I can see already a lot of questions and queries popping up. So we will have the question and answer session at the end of our presentation. So keep on posting. So now it's to Dave to share his thoughts and insight with us.
Thanks, Vitalia. And I'm going to keep it short because Petra's done an amazing job actually of not just summarising why this is so important, but some of the great initiatives which are going on actually, and some of the kind of the activities on a university scale, but more widely. So I'll pick up on some of that from what we're doing at Edinburgh, so my university. So some of this will be similar to Petra's, but nowhere near as articulate. So one of the things I wanted to do so I'm a climate scientist, is give a little bit again of that view about why we need to do this without going into just repeating what Petra said. One of the things for all of our universities and colleges is that this is obviously the climate emergency is existential in terms of many people's futures, as well as natural ecosystems. But for our universities as well, if we don't embed climate education within our learning, then students will go elsewhere and actually will be failing in terms of our role of helping ensure that society has the tools, the solutions, as Petra called them, to tackle things like the climate emergency, deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have an obligation, a real duty, we have a vested interest in getting this right for our own institutions and their sustainability. One of the things here in the UK that I've been involved with was the Green Jobs Task Force, looking at that across the economy in terms of what's required around skills and jobs. And we kept coming back to education at all levels, including tertiary education being really underpinning how we're going to make progress across all the sectors which need to decarbonize. So if we think about all the disciplines in our universities, all the things we teach and where all our graduates go, they go into every sector of society, and climate change demands action in all of those sectors and is being shaped right now by climate change in terms of impacts and trying to obviously make things more resilient. So we've got that kind of fundamental role. We've also got that huge urgency. And again, Petra's figures really highlighted where we are at the moment in terms of the Paris climate goals, the ambition to limit warming to 1.5. We're already well over 1 degree in terms of average increase, and the current commitments around the world, they don't get us anywhere near the 1.5 level. We'll be very lucky if we limit warming to 2. So that does mean we need to really push hard over these next 8 years to try and get emissions down by 2030. And part of that, like we both said, is underpinned, all of it is underpinned by education. So I guess, I mean, I've reflected a lot over the last couple of years in particular in terms of what roles our universities have on climate change. And we do so much, obviously, around research and innovation in terms of policy advice on climate change. Our most powerful effects probably on global society, and this is true throughout our histories as universities, is through our graduates. It's through the learning, it's through the teaching. And we have this huge role as international universities, like we all are, in terms of our graduates going on to have an impact across all nations of the world, hopefully a really positive impact. But we're also real local hubs for climate action. You know, we're part of communities, we're often parts of cities and towns, and are looked to in terms of how we are decarbonising our estates. Again, Petra mentioned some of the initiatives at Nottingham and elsewhere that are going on that, but also how we're working with our local schools and our local businesses. So we have a huge opportunity there actually to help our cities, our towns decarbonise and become more resilient. So I'm going to go on to what we've kind of come to at the University of Edinburgh, and a lot of this has been part of the work Vitalia mentioned, which is a group of 80 plus universities in the UK who got together before COP26 to really look at how universities could support COP26 in Glasgow here in Scotland, but as part of that, how education actually fits with the goals of the Paris Agreement, of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And it produced some great discussions, but also a lot of great action actually, and a lot of sharing of really good activity, like again Petra has shown. So the paper we put out in terms of mainstreaming climate education in higher education, it was brilliant to put together because we had a huge response when we put the call out for people who were interested. So it was a massive authorship to handle, but what we found very quickly was the commonalities across our institutions. We face very similar challenges in terms of the the lack of capacity at the moment to actually embed or mainstream climate education across all the disciplines. We all teach climate change in some bits of our university, but it tends to be a little bit siloed. Everyone's very busy. We've still got a pandemic going on. It's a tough ask, but actually what we did identify were quite a few ways this can work. So I'm going to go through some of our recommendations from that paper and some of the ones which we put to our senior management in Edinburgh, for instance, and also some of the enablers that were picked up. So when we were looking at our curriculum and how it can mainstream climate education and sustainability, we looked at the different models, and there are kind of three models that we established that were already being used. One is to have a core course, a climate literacy course, like Petra described, and make that available for all students and ideally all staff, and you build capacity that way. And a lot of universities are doing that, and that's great. But one of the issues that was found is, and again, the research that Petra flagged mentioned this, that there's not much headroom in the curriculum. When we think about training our medics, for instance, or the dentists with you, Vitalia, they've got a really crammed curriculum that they have to meet. And so if you make a course available for everyone, it doesn't mean they can all do it or will all do it. And so that mainstreaming, it's part of the solution, but it won't reach across all the disciplines and all the students like you might want it to be. We looked at how we might try and improve that provision and accessibility in terms of teaching it online, looking at slots which were protected from the rest of the curriculum. And that's certainly part of the answer. Another thing we looked at, and this is the one that's much harder work but excites me so much more, is actually building that capacity within the teaching teams right across the institution. So things like going to the teaching offices or the equivalent in each of the schools or departments, and actually helping the staff there understand what is relevant to what they're already teaching. Again, Petra pointed out some really good examples, some challenges. You might think, oh, how on earth is linguistics anything to do with climate change? It is, and it needs to be embedded in terms of climate change understanding. But those educators need support in terms of how to do that, and so co-designing the curriculum to actually get to a stage where if you're a student going through that program, you might probably ideally, you don't even know you're learning about climate change because it is properly embedded. So you come out as a great graduate in terms of as a dentist, as a doctor, as a musician, but you understand climate change in terms of the context of how you work professionally and personally. And so that takes a lot more, obviously, investment of time and energy for a university, but it can be, I think, really effective. And it's probably where we need to get to, so that every student actually gets that embedded climate understanding. So the third example that we picked up that a lot of universities were using was the students actually engaging in climate and sustainability related projects with communities and with other universities. So a lot of us are part of great networks. You know, there's Uni Europa, Universitas 21, lots of really good university networks which are pushing this, and so students able to get involved and work with each other and with communities and businesses on climate change in that way. So very much a kind of work-based learning approach. So all of those kind of three categories, and obviously there are lots that fit within them and probably others I haven't mentioned. Our recommendations to our university was instead of going, right, we should do number one and have a core course for every student that covers climate change, or number two in terms of this building capacity and actually embedding it throughout all of our disciplines, or the third one in terms of extracurricular and community projects, actually all three should be provided, because actually they all give different benefits, often synergistically, to the student experience and to what our graduate attributes would be. So that brings me finally, so I said this was going to be short, to the enablers. And this was a great discussion with the group in terms of what barriers they had faced and how they can be overcome. So a key one is senior management buy-in. So our universities obviously have a huge amount to deliver, and our senior management, if they're not bought in to mainstream and climate change education, it simply won't happen, because it does mean significant effort. It means quite a lot of change to our curricula, certainly in my university, and so it does need that buy-in. And that's been great in my experience from my institution in terms of that conversation with our senior management. They kind of get it, and sometimes the conversations are about the student demand. I mean, that's much louder probably than their academic colleagues, because the student demand is so high, and so they're responding to that. But also in terms of employer demand, and that employability of our students, and the business model for the university has to respond to the climate emergency in this way. Another key enabler is that capacity building across all the disciplines. And like I say, that's probably the one with the biggest bill in terms of the time of people who work on climate change education right now, having the kind of support and time to go and help build capacity across their institutions, and often that can be across multiple institutions, like I mentioned, using that network approach. But we've got this great critical mass. We've got people like all of you on the call are probably doing this. You're the kind of people who can help not just deliver directly, but actually build your institution's capacity to embed climate change education. And the third one is this is me as an eternal optimist, as a climate scientist. I have to be, but looking at the silver lining. And when you're transforming curricula like this, you need the right conditions. And at the moment, we've got a really disrupted world. We've got a really challenging world. We've got our students with a lot of climate anxiety. We've got a pandemic ongoing, different ways of learning that we've all had to be exposed to and make use of over the last 2 years. We have a climate emergency, which is intensifying. And like I say, we've got the student and employer demand. So in terms of realizing this transformation of our curricula to meet the demands of a climate emergency, now is a really good time, because the world is in such a challenging phase. And so yeah, if we don't do it now in terms of the climate emergency, we miss an amazing opportunity to cut emissions, just like Petra was saying, limit the warming, but also increase resilience. But also there's that real danger, if we don't grasp the nettle right now, that we slip into a business as usual approach with our curriculum, and actually we're doing a disservice to our students, and through that to the whole of global society. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing these points with us. And so again, I've seen quite a lot of questions appearing. So some on the question and answer, and some on the chat. So we'll get back to you all in hopefully less than 10 minutes, because again, I'm going to have quite a short presentation that hopefully will expand on some of the points that Petra made and Dave, and probably provide also some actionable practical suggestions, illustrate some points. So let me just see, going to share, and yeah, so that's the, oops, so I have to go through all points. So that's so the 3 questions that we put down as key questions that we would like to answer as part of this panel session. And these are the panelists. And now it's a slide that shows 2 charts. The first chart shows that in 2013, teachers from all faculties, including the health sciences and dentistry staff, the purple bar charts, had relatively high values in concern about climate change. This is quite understandable, as climate change is among the greatest public health threats of 21st century that has been pointed out by both panelists. Thus, medical and dental schools are the perfect place to foster sustainability movement within the healthcare profession. However, if you look at chart 2, way back almost a decade ago, it shows that health science and dentistry staff had relatively low levels of responsibility to teach about climate change. And so now, so on this slide, you see a number of insights into the current state. So teachers remain highly committed to developing environmental stewardship within students who may go on to promote eco-friendly practices when they graduate. That's the whole purpose. So Petra shared the survey findings, and health sciences and dentistry faculties consistently emphasize the lack of space on their curricula. So what is quite interesting that there is limited consensus about topics that should be integrated into the curricula. For the reasons that the understanding of the topic is complex, considering the global context and the divergent opinions on the subject. If climate change education initiatives are to be successful, as Dave pointed out, one of the enablers is to ensure that teachers are comfortable with the subject. So Petra's initiative is actually helping teachers to feel comfortable with the subject. So the 4 professional development efforts are needed to better prepare university faculty to incorporate climate change into curriculum. So that's this kind of so a challenge that Dave pointed out. So ensuring that teachers have access to high quality resources for teaching climate education within undergraduate and postgraduate programs. As David pointed out, there are several successful models on climate-focused education in the UK. So what you see on the slide, so it does not quite represent an exhaustive list, but they do constitute the most commonly observed models. And as I mentioned before, so our faculty, feels that constraints that curricula of medical and dental schools are already full, and adding content related to the climate education is a challenge. Thus, we have opted for 3 models, adding climate change related content to the existing curriculum, service learning, and co-curriculum, or as David referred to it, extracurricular activities. So all 3 models provide opportunities to our students and staff to explore oral health concerns and the link to sustainability and climate change. Next few slides will just highlight and showcase what is happening with regards to each of the model. So to begin with, we have a team of practitioners who are passionate about playing their part in educating on climate change. And it does not take an environmental expert to speak about climate change and environmental issues. Obviously, it would help perhaps to roll out the initiative that Petra has mentioned, so across all universities, across all faculties, and that will bolster teachers' feel of being comfortable with the subject. So individual teachers integrate content into their sessions, and that content actually complements a particular component within the curriculum. understandably, losing this staff member will jeopardize climate literacy efforts, and hence my earlier point about professional development. Now, so the next initiative is a good illustration how the existing strategy was replicated and adopted within our school. Medical year 1 and 2 students were given opportunities to write their dissertations on topic related to climate change. Students commented, this is that student voice, student commented that these projects furthered their awareness about the intersection on climate change and population health, along with the greening of healthcare. So our dental school decided to do is to take this on board, and we've actually extended the topics, or extended the pool of teachers who are contributing the titles. So rather than just asking the academic members of staff to provide the titles, so we've asked our NHS colleagues, practitioners, nurses, so NHS staff who is responsible for monitoring so how a specific clinic or hospital is doing with regards to greening their operation, with regards to meeting so certain targets that are set in the National Health Care long-term plan. So that way we've actually became more inclusive, and we are working with the NHS practitioners. So it's not just kind of, so we as teachers know better. And service learning model was really useful for our faculty. So it is used in year 4 and 5. Obviously, some dental and medical students always ask for 5 years. The impact is extensive. Firstly, working with local communities in various outreach clinics allowed year 4 and 5 undergraduate students to gain valuable patient care experience and to further their competencies under real world conditions. In addition, it also bolstered climate education. So you can read more about this model by accessing the link that the case study is hosted on COP26 Universities Network. And as Dave pointed out, co-curriculum activities that are connected or complement the academic curriculum are also a good way, and should be considered by all universities and all faculties. Of course, these activities are on voluntary basis, and in order for students to feel like, okay, so I also would like to have something at the end of it that I can kind of show to my employer. So I guess quite a lot of universities are certifying these activities for students. So here in Manchester, we have the Stallify, and students can register as their activities and the hours that they've spent on a hope, and at the end, what is quite important, so their contribution to the activities and support that they've provided to the local community will feature on the transcript. So yes, I know that a lot of students are doing things because they are passionate about it, but so at the end of the day, so the employers also see that because it features on the transcript. What is quite good about the co-curriculum activities that all students from all years can take part. Some initiatives are rolling, on an annual basis, so are repeated each year, whereas some initiatives are more short-term projects that emerged based on students' interest and allow them to further their awareness and be active in the community. I particularly enjoyed supporting a project that looked at promoting bamboo toothbrushes. And so, so my final slide is kind of going to re-emphasize a few points that Dave made when he talked about enablers and literally how we should be moving forward to ensure that so in 8 years we see some fruitful results. So obviously, Dave pointed out an interdisciplinary networks within his university, and no doubt that that exists in other universities as well. But for universities to make a real impact in the field of climate education, it is prudent to create cross-university networks. They should bring together staff from different universities to facilitate exchange of good practice. And authors should make the resources available online free to any other school to access. And so it's possible to use web-based hubs so for sharing the resources. Also, these networks will help establish areas where climate change education could be strengthened by developing subject-specific resources. And again, for certain disciplines, so it's perhaps prudent to collaborate with the curriculum regulatory bodies, so to ensure that graduates have the right set of skills, so that the employers are requiring. And so the student voice is quite strong at the moment. And so the idea is that we will keep listening to students because they generally have some good ideas and perhaps even different perspectives. So that kind of enriches our understanding of the problem and how we could move forward. So I will stop sharing my slides, and now I'm kind of going to start with the question and answer part. So it has got only 5 points. So we've got so 5 points. Dave, Petra, so feel free to say which one you want to answer.
Sure. So there was a good question from Emilio, and I'm sure Petra's got ideas on this as well. So it's asking about practical teaching tools, so that students can kind of make climate change a reality, and they can get their real or virtual hands onto it. So I've got a couple of examples. One I really like, and this is a virtual example. If I can put it into the, yeah, that's it. So this is Financial Times. And it's basically a game where you are like the supreme being, so you control the whole world, and it's whether you can meet the Paris climate goals. Can you tackle climate change? So it gives you the power to make decisions over how much you invest in renewable energy, for instance, over fossil fuels, how much you constrain people's distance they travel by air travel, those kind of things. And it's underpinned by basically a socioeconomic and emissions model, which gives you an outcome. So you can, as a student or as any user, have a bit of fun in terms of playing God on the climate and seeing what that means in terms of the trade-offs and the choices you have to make. So that's quite a fun one that I just did recently and completely failed on to actually meet the Paris climate goals, but it was good. The other one, so I'm going to put this, I'm also going to share this link, and this is something where I have complete bias on it because, let me find the link here, sorry about this, because it's my students here at Edinburgh, and it's basically I think I say on the video that it's a nice trip out, but basically it was taking the students out to do a field trip, but it was taking us to a local community. And in Edinburgh, we have a beautiful coastline, and we have a beach called Portobello Beach. And so it's taken the students there to talk about climate change in terms of sea level rise and acidification of the oceans. So to spend some time on the beach. But what we did was we went along and measured the height of the beach and talked about what projected sea level rise was. So they could look at the houses along the seafront and basically go, well, that row of houses by the second half of the century is at real risk of sea level rise. So it was very hands-on in terms of doing some of the tools that you use for leveling, so basically estimating the height above sea level, and matching that with the stuff we had learnt in class about the projected sea levels, the models, and what had happened historically. And we rounded it off by all of them being in teams and building sandcastles and trying to come up with a sandcastle design which was the most resilient to the incoming tide. So that they were my examples on that question, which basically were just a lot of fun. But great question, Amelia.
Okay, maybe it's okay if I go on. Yeah.
Yes. I
first
think Adamo took part in your training, so maybe you want to answer a couple of his questions.
Yeah, no, I want to first also answer to the first question.
Okay, yeah.
And also because I made a technical mistake with Paola. Paola, if you could put your question again in the Q&A, because I asked Paola in answer which discipline she wants to know it, and this kind of answered the question, which obviously it's not answered. So Paola, if you could post it again, please, in the Q&A, and then we can pick it up and you tell us which discipline you want to have some ideas for. But generally, I wanted to also kind of share in the chat one tool which I find really, really useful for any discipline to get started. And this is what I did show you the slide En-ROADS kind of from Climate Interactive, which was designed together with the MIT, because I think this is something you could integrate into any curriculum. It takes only, I think the fastest I have run it, which was with some MPs, and they never have time. So I was only allowed like 20 minutes. I had to do it in 20 minutes, but still get the general message across kind of. So you can do it very fast. And I think you can fit it into any curriculum. I mean, we always can find some 20 minutes in a year, but obviously I would recommend to do it for an hour. So that people get a bit of a better understanding. But what it really tells you is, first of all, the urgency, but also how we have to actually integrate all the different solutions together. And then obviously everyone can pick what they can do in their discipline. So I think it's a fantastic tool to get people started. And if you're interested, Climate Interactive offers free training. It's also 8 hours, and you will really understand the tool quite well. So if you're not so secure yet and you think, oh, I rather want to really understand it in more detail, you can either do the training 8 hours, or there's a 500 pages guide. So try one or the other, whatever you prefer. But I think you can even do it without all that. I have sometimes students really get into it kind of, and they then suddenly say, oh, I spent my whole weekend to really get the best scenario for the world, and they just do it from what they understand, not with all the scientific knowledge and everything behind. But I think it's a fantastic way of getting an overview and then finding your own place in the solution. So strong recommendation. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm kind of not sure if we do have a specific link to resources that will be suitable for primary school children. I'm kind of at the top of my head. I believe that that UK School Council has created a specific guide for primary school teachers, but unfortunately I do not have a link to that particular resource. Okay. Paola came back to us with some kind of some suggestions about the discipline. Now, so there is a good question about with regards to what the youth in across the globe can do. And so obviously we still have this disparity in terms of the resources that are available for youth in developed, so transitioning economies, and probably less developed countries. I would say that so the advice is to carry on being interested, carry on being passionate, and so we've seen that the voice of students is actually heard, as Dave pointed out. By raising these issues, so it nudges so us educators, maybe not specifically educators, but the management team, that to kind of understand that so it's not just our wishes, so our desires to change the curriculum. So there is definitely a demand from students. Local activities are something that attracts attention, so therefore youth across the globe so would contribute by getting involved locally and carrying on with activism. So we do have a few questions from Debbie. Or not, just one, not maybe two.
Can I just come back on that question about?
Oh yes, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just Petra talked a little bit about this in terms of the climate change education for mitigation versus adaptation and the different kind of emphases that you put on. And I think that that question brings it out. The context is king on this, in terms of climate education needs to be something which bears in mind the audience all the way through, and what is needed. So that student voice, which you mentioned, Vitalia, as well, is crucial. And that means that coming up with a resource on climate change, a climate change literacy course, or whatever it is only as good as it's fit with that audience and what they need to know. And so I think there is a gap at the moment in terms of the great resources for English speakers, for the global north, particularly in Europe. We've got some great ones. Actually, when you look around the world at some of the less developed countries, the resources aren't there. And if they can access our open access courses, they may be a little bit too generic. And so there's a job to do there in terms of that granularity. Certainly on a national scale and on a sub-national scale, actually giving learning resources which really do fit with their curriculum, their education system, and actually the kind of skills and learnings which are really going to, be most appropriate for their context. So I'm going to unashamedly share one of the things we've been doing through the network that Vitalia mentioned in the UK, is creating open access courses on climate change for individual countries, and it's been a real a great learning experience, because every time we've approached this, we've instantly discovered what we thought was good climate change education was quite a bit different from what the people in country, the educators, the climate researchers, etc., saw as being required. And so it needs to be that co-creation. It needs to be supported, yes, by our money in the global north, and by that linking together institutions, but it does need that in-country expertise and that in-country context to make it most relevant. So I'll throw, Petra, I'm gonna put one of those links up in. Now you've asked me, I'll put in our Climate Solutions India course as an example, where we had to change it a fair bit to make it, and this is with colleagues who are in country in India, who said actually the emphasis in India, yes, there's a big one on mitigation, they're a major emitter, and the transition needs to be rapid in terms of away from fossil fuels, but it needed much more emphasis in terms of adaptation, because in India they're seeing, as we're seeing right now today, absolutely deadly temperatures, which are made massively more likely. I think it's 300 times more likely by climate change than you would have without greenhouse gas warming. So I'll put that in there.
Yeah. Then maybe if I could come. Yes. Sorry.
Yes. So I think this is the question for you, Petra. So I think that, yes, evaluating the impact is important, because that is, again, so a way to kind of so get more people on board across communities. So therefore, yes, I think so. We should so find time evaluating the impact, and so maybe you can tell us more.
Yeah, I actually I have not the time for evaluating the impact, because I want to have the impact. So actually, if someone wants to actually do the evaluation with me, I would be really pleased. So because then do the research around it and things, because I think for me it's really a question of acting fast. I kind of do it more with the kind of like with the climate literacy training. We have a lot on feedback, and so I encourage people to give me feedback, and I pick it up when people do this as well. But for me, the impact is really when I hear people that they have actually, as if, for example, I had the vice chancellor taking part, and she kind of changed her strategy for the whole university. This is for me impact. I can't give you a number, I can't give you an article for it, just based on I have seen her action plan, I have helped her with it kind of. So this is for me how I see it. And we have with the climate literacy training, we have trained over 10,000 people so far. And most of, as everyone has to go out with an action plan. And I think this is kind of where the change comes. And I see a lot of these action plans. And if you are interested really in trying to design it for yourself, I would really encourage you, obviously I would have said this, to take the next training. But what is really, I think, helpful is that at the end, in the final session, we are trying to put you together with people who have the same aim. So for example, if you are kind of saying, yes, I want to integrate it into agriculture, we would put you together with other people from agriculture. Normally quite a lot of people, as we have normally about 100 people or so doing the training simultaneously, and we break everyone out into groups of 4 or 5 at the end, always focus on their topic. So if you have if you want to work on something, I would strongly encourage you to get the training, understand the background and what you need to achieve, and then be in this final group and then design something together. And from these groups, we have people who have actually stayed together. So for example, the first training was in 2019, I think, and the people still together from this group. So they have kind of, since then, it was 5 different universities, they have just kept together. I mean, they only had to get an assessment for themselves, a certificate, obviously, but they enjoyed the work so much, and they have actually, for the whole pandemic and everything, done joint projects worldwide, because obviously all the students could be online, and it was easy to organize from different countries. And has not changed. It's still easy to organize international trainings online, kind of. So they are kind of working together still. And I think this is really what is nice about it as well, that you might find peers with a similar interest, and then you just go together on the path and you try to make your changes in your curriculum. So I think it's for me the best. I mean, there are some guides also, and I try to always, I mean, I know that people have not much time. So one thing I have actually done, which I didn't put on my list because it's more as a business student guide to sustainable management. And this is actually for people in business schools to help them to integrate the SDGs especially, but we are working on the 3rd revision at the moment, and this will come out in November, which will actually have a focus on integrating climate change education. So every one of the authors in this book has been asked to now integrate climate change education for the 3rd. So if you're thinking of the business school, I mean, get this one. It has already a bit on climate change, but the last one was in 2017. And the next one will be much stronger on this aspect. So this might be for business school, it's something you could take. Also, then the last one, sorry, I did just randomly put something in the chat, which is Educate Global. You might not know what this is about. Educate Global, I think, is a really interesting organization if you look at the curriculum for secondary and primary schools. So if you want to get in contact with them, they have done fascinating things like comics, also like animated comics for primary school kids and things. So I think this would be a good starting point as well. Yeah.
Fabulous. So thanks for all these signposting. Now, Emilio, yes, I'm afraid gloves represent a huge waste. What we are trying to do across the faculty is to raise the awareness amongst our students, because they just kind of put them on, take them off. Oh, now I can't put them, so the ones that I've used, so I need to get the new ones, and we're getting through packs of them every day, and obviously all of that is ending up in landfill sites, and obviously then we kind of see the effects on soil pollution and other things. And so as a part of our kind of initial talk, during the lab sessions, is to kind of discuss with students, probably kind of the what is happening with that glove once you've dumped it into that bin. First of all, is it the right bin? And here we're talking about the disposal. Each lab has got like 3 or 5 bins, if the glove is ending up in a wrong bin, so that obviously will lead to some extra cost to the university. But then what we are trying to emphasize is that obviously later on, when you are working at a hospital or a clinic, that will mean extra bill for you or for your employer. These are the discussions that we are having with our students in an effort to reduce the unnecessary use of gloves. And each March, there is a worldwide campaign to do with the kind of raising awareness about the use of gloves. We do hope that universities across the globe will support that particular week. It's called Gloves Week. So I will put a link in the chat just for you to kind of have a look. Whilst one of the other panelists will kind of look at Paula's question about more standardized curriculum. I must admit that generally, within our faculty, we kind of haven't got a standardized curriculum. Maybe all the disciplines, as Petra pointed out, already have something to share. So anyone else wants to add to take Paula's question?
I was just going to, if I can, I was just going to quickly jump to reply to Debbie's question, which is a really good point, because we haven't mentioned the QAA guidance, which is really, really good. Really, it's been recently updated. I think last year, wasn't it, Debbie? But it was updated, and it really does show how you embed learning for sustainability, so more broadly, and addressing the sustainable development goals in teaching and tertiary education. So that is a great, I guess, not just document, but framework and lots of kind of actions that could be taken. Those that, you know, the kind of enablers are fleshed out there. I suppose, you know, climate change education needs to be part of that, and actually in some ways climate change education, I don't know how you were all finding this, but in those conversations with senior management, it actually is a really good way in to getting that traction, using the QAA guidance actually to show that the pathways that should be taken to embed it in that wider context. So really, I just wanted to essentially shout out to Debbie. Thank you for mentioning that guidance, because I think it's a really fantastic resource for all universities and all of us when we're looking at how you actually implement all of this.
And I think maybe I can add again. I think I don't mention it to anybody that I didn't say it straight away. I was actually in the advisory board for the QAA guidance and didn't even include it in my slides. I should have done it, so don't tell anybody, please. But I think it's a really, really good resource as well. I mean, I did see that actually. It is as a bit the problem is that it is actually available in the full version for all the UK universities, but if you are from another country, you need to maybe send me an email or so, and then I can put you in contact with the QAA, because you are getting the short version kind of. So there's a worldwide version available. The short, the long one is for the UK specific, but I think if you contact them directly, they might also make an exemption as well. And I think in this context, it might be interesting that obviously the QAA has decided to actually encourage all the disciplines now to integrate this into because everyone is coming up for renewal. And I'm, for example, in the group as in the advisory board for business and management at the moment, and we are just kind of fighting about how we put the words in there, kind of how strong we put the climate change education, if you also have to address all the other topics and things. So it is coming out in every discipline, and I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, already 10 disciplines I think have been renewed, and they all have taken education for sustainable development into account now. So you might want to look for your discipline if it's already out. Yeah.
Thank you again. So I'm just kind of now so checking the chat just to see if so we've got some unanswered questions. Okay, so links. So I'm not as quick as I should be at scanning the questions.
So there's one just come up in the chat from.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, go for it. Yeah. So
yeah,
it's right at the bottom.
One of the things I guess that which are really useful, I think, for our community, if you call us a kind of climate and sustainability learning community or whatever you call us, that the conference of the parties are really important, and that includes the biodiversity COP, which is coming up. But COP27 was the question in terms of, so that's the climate change COP, which will be in Egypt in November, and the question was around what's happening for that, or do we know anything which is going on for students, and organising something specific. So there will be a lot happening at COP27, quite a few things around that. Obviously the student organisations, you know, the mock COP, the COIs, the Conference of Youth, those kind of things will go ahead. From a UK perspective, again, the universities network are doing things for COP27, particularly around things like green careers and how we support our students in terms of that advice as they come into university. Is university the right place for them or not to actually follow the career paths they want to? But certainly when they're with us and as they graduate from the universities, how do we actually provide those green career pathways which fit with the demand and the needs in different sectors and different countries? So that's something which is certainly a focus for our network in the run up to COP27. The other thing that I wanted to flag at COP27, which we're doing here in the UK and is probably being replicated in most countries, is even if you're not going to Egypt, doing stuff in your home country, and particularly with schools. So there's so much demand from schools to learn about climate change. The teachers want support in terms of how they embed climate change into what they're teaching. And often we as universities can help with that in terms of working with the teachers, providing resources, going in, giving talks, and helping our local schools, particularly around the COPs where the children are asking about it. They're seeing it in the news, and actually helping them with events there. So that's certainly a target for us, is to work with loads of schools around the UK around climate change in the context of COP27. So yeah, hopefully should be good.
Fantastic. So yes, I guess so a lot of universities in Africa, so we will be sharing their efforts. So that will be a really interesting. I would say, first of all, paper or a set of papers that could emerge, but also a meeting where a lot of great initiatives will be shared, and no doubt. So a lot of universities in Europe and in the UK are I'm working closely with some of the universities so in Africa. So we've had a very good and successful Zulu project. We do hope that so it will be kind of widely publicized also during COP27. So do we have any more questions? I think we've answered them all, and we've got a couple of minutes spared. I'm just kind of going to say thank you to all our panelists. So it was, I think, a very useful discussion around climate change education, so adaptation and mitigation, and what could be done, how we can improve, and further what we have been doing for the last decade. Understandably, there will be more events organized by ISCN so in the next few months, and I do hope to see many delegates at the next event. We've got some more links. Thank you, Petra, for sharing that. So yes, so I would just say that so the whole week was filled with various interesting presentations, and so if there are still some questions unanswered, please get in touch with so all of us. We would be very happy to help you to answer your queries, and maybe that will lead to some further collaborations. So take care, enjoy your weekend. Obviously, in some parts, you still have got Friday afternoon to get through. We are here already, almost at the end of Friday, so 4:30, and we will be putting our tools down. Great to have everyone on board. Thank you to organizers who were behind the scene. So I'm just going to say thank you, everyone, and so take care.